Music.
Good evening, everybody. This is the pre-show. We give it about 10 minutes for everybody to log in. 10 or so. Hoping this is working to broadcast to those other sites right now. Hey, Chris. Hey, Mom. Looks like it is working. Hey, Mona. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Kurt. So far, so good. Hey, Dina and Geraldine. Hey, Mandy Crypto's out there from F in Chicago. Hey, Mona. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Becky, Amy, and Emily. Hey, Susie. Good evening, everybody.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
Hey, Jenny. Hey, Katie. Hey, Patty, Kevin, Mary. Hey, Kate and Nick. Evening, Laura. Oh, glad you made it. Alright, what I can't see so far is how my numbers are doing. Let's see if I can fix that anyway. Hey, Mary. Hey, Nanette. Hey, Dave and Barb. Hey, Dwayne. Yeah, there are now subtitles through this thing. So that's something. Alright, now I can see some numbers. Hey, Gene. Hey, William. Hey, Robert and Carrie and Ilana. Hey, Paxton. Enjoy. I don't know if I'm seeing all of the numbers here, all of the comments here. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Megler. Ilana. Hey, Luann. Hey, William. Now I found a way to rig up so I can see the numbers a little. I'm not sure I'm doing it right. It's not saying in real time. Hey, Linda. Hey, John. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Rose. There are subtitles now. There's going to be something in your settings to turn them on. But I didn't even know they were going to be here, but we're using some new software to stream right now. So we should be going live right now to multiple platforms. Let's see if I can figure it out for sure. Yeah, I seem to be live on YouTube. Good on Twitch? Alright. Excellent. Welcome along, everybody. Evening, Trish. Hey, Yvette. That may be my first YouTube comment here. Evening, Teresa. Hey, Terry. Hey, Napur. All I can really say if you're having trouble with the subtitles is there'll be something in your settings. Oh, hey, Kathy, that's cool. Yeah, click on the gear thing. That'll probably give you adjustments for things. Hey, Betsy and Bolingbrook. Linda, the Twitch is twitch.tv/AdamChicago. Yep, still on Patreon, Ellen. That's still going too. And there'll be the thing down below here. We're kind of experimenting with new things now that PayPal and Venmo have decided I'm a gambling kingpin. Hey, Karen, welcome along. Hey, Rockio, hey, Lisa.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Hey, Laura. Hey, Lee. Hey, Sherry. Yeah, it looks like this is working. I don't know if I'm getting comments from Twitch here. But I'm getting the ones from Facebook and YouTube, so that's cool. I had a job typing out closed captions for a while. We were captioning old Johnny Carson shows. So if anybody needs a joke about the 1984 GOP convention, I got them down. And problem is nobody actually ended up getting paid at that job. Evening, Linda. Hey, Christine. Hey, Kara. Hey, Grandma Belle. Hey, Sari. Hey, Meg and Ava. All my heart, I say I love you dearly. Alright, the mini tours I'm not sure I'll be able to do the subtitles on. The mini tours I haven't found a way to do this platform mobile yet. Evening, Cheryl. Hey, Chuck. Wasn't I like 4 years old in 1984? That's about right, yeah. Hey, Maria in NYC. Hey, thanks, Mary. With all my heart. Hey, Tom, it's going well. Hey, Marcelina. It's going well, except they forgot to bring my Dr. Brown's with the deli order. Twice. First they forgot my sandwich and the pop, and then they brought the sandwich and threw in a black and white, but still forgot the pop. No one. This is Benny Goodman and his orchestra live at the Congress Hotel. It's a radio show on archive.org. Zap, I'm on the iPhone. I'm an Apple man. Hey, Tara. Hey, Kara. Yeah, there's probably going to be a delay between the platforms. They probably won't all be exactly alike. The Twitch handle is Adam Chicago, if you want to watch on there. So we're trying a lot of experiments this week with new tip options. That's by necessity. And new streaming options. That's been something that I should have done a long time ago. Hey, DJ. Hey, Lana. Hey, Tony. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Connie. Hey, Michael. Hey, Patricia. Hey, Denise and Bella. Evening, Karen. Hey, Elaine. And Bedrock. Twitch. Susie, the YouTube should be youtube.com/Adam Seltzer. I'm trying to get it to go to the mysterious Chicago one, but I've had weird trouble trying to figure that out. Just one more thing. I got it working on one. That's enough for this week. Plus, I also have more subscribers on that. Where did I get a can of Jolt? They were selling it at Family Dollar recently. They might still be. No, not Family Dollar, Dollar General. It was like a Dollar General exclusive. Somebody bought out the rights to it. If you want to recreate Jolt, just take a Pepsi and add like 3 packets of sugar. You get pretty much the same effect. Hey, Judy. Hey, Helen. Hey, Allison. Hey, Natalie. Yeah, the numbers on this one have been pretty good. People have been a lot more interested or going stuff coming up. And I am going to shut down the mail app now, so if anybody's about to email me with tech support questions, it is too late. Hey, Kristen. Crap week all around, I think. I mean, we were just talking about this on effing Chicago's group chat. Like, what a crap week this has been. Everything's broken. Hey, Suzanne, welcome along on the YouTube. Hey, Nancy. Greetings, Mary. In Nashville. Looking forward to getting back to Nashville. Evening, Jane. I got round 1 done myself. My brother got round 1 today. Hey, Linda, this is the first time I've ever done one on Twitch, so hopefully the numbers will build up over time, but right now nobody knows about it on Twitch. Hey, Edwina. What can you mix with Captain Morgan's and spiced rum? Coca-Cola. Casey, I wish there could be. And who knows, if nobody says anything about it in the comments, maybe I'll just pick a random person of those who send the tip to send out a book to. Welcome along, everybody. This is our first time we've live streamed over to Twitch as well. We'll give it to the end of this Benny Goodman song to get started. That's usually what we do, give everybody some time to get on. Laura, congrats. Twitch handle is Adam Chicago. I realized after I signed up that it should have been Mysterious Chicago, but now they say I can't change it for a while. Lynn, Twitch is another streaming platform. Popular with the kids. I'm drinking my Jepson's Bourbon, Single Barrel Z31, my favorite. Alright, 600 people, that's awesome. They would shut down all of the incentive programs right when we got around to this. But, you know what that sound is? That is the sound of Benny Goodman finishing that track, which means it's time for me to get going properly on this here tour. So, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So, welcome along, everybody. I am Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for about 15 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, and I used to write young adult novels for a living. The most recent was Just Kill Me, which is all about a ghost tour guide who makes places more haunted by killing people at them. So as you can see, I am incredibly famous. In fact, I am so incredibly famous that Candace Johnson, Candace with an I, the great muralist, has just drawn me into a mural on a bar in Wrigleyville. Look at this. Here I am with Marion Mahoney Griffin, H.H. Holmes, Daniel Burnham, and Louis Sullivan. I think Burnham and I are chuckling about how we've actually switched out Sullivan's drink for a Diet Coke, because I hope so. So really, we shouldn't be enabling that guy. But welcome along. I'm so glad to have everybody. It's a bit of an experiment tonight. Normally I'm right in the Facebook app. Today I'm using a couple of apps so I can simultaneously stream this over to YouTube. I can stream it over to Twitch. And it looks like I'm getting comments on all of those things. So, alright, so far, so good. We'll see how this all works out over the course of the night. So welcome along once again. Let me just tell you what we're going to do. Prairie Avenue started out as just the dunes. Then it became the Millionaire District, and then it was taken over by factories, then it fell into decline, and now it has risen again. So in many ways, it is the quintessential Chicago neighborhood from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Aiden, you'll find a great many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. Let's put a wrinkle in his brain. So here's what we'll be doing for a route today. Let me show you where we're going, first of all. So here's a map. There's Chicago, the Loop area. And we'll scroll in here ever so smoothly. If you go just a little ways south of the Loop, you come to the Prairie Avenue Historic District around 18th and Prairie. That's a couple of blocks east of Michigan Avenue. We'll start here on Calumet, then work our way to Prairie, head down Prairie to past 18th to Cullerton, check a couple of buildings out there, a little more on Prairie, then back around to Calumet to finish off. That'll be our route. So, once again, everybody, I'm Adam Seltzer. Here we go. So to get started with, around Calumet, right around the block from where the Prairie Historic District sits, in the shadow of Soldier Field, which you can see in the background, is Battle of Fort Dearborn Park. See, this was one of the first places in Chicago where something happened. But back during the War of 1812, up where the Loop is now, was Fort Dearborn. This is how it looked about 20 years after that. This is how the area looked. Over on the other side of this would have been this big log fort. During the War of 1812, word came in that the British were marching on the area. They had to evacuate everybody out to Fort Wayne. So the soldiers and their families set off towards Fort Wayne, accompanied by 500 members of the Potawatomi tribe, and accompanied by about 50 members of the Miami tribe as well. And they used to call it the Fort Dearborn Massacre. We've now decided Battle of Fort Dearborn is a better word for it. But when they got down to about here, right about 16th or 18th and Prairie, the Potawatomi attacked. They were actually working for the British. It's very difficult to get a handle on what really happened here. A lot of people wrote first-hand accounts, but nobody wrote a first-hand account without turning themselves into Indiana Jones. But this became one of the landmarks in Chicago history. One of the stars on our flag represents the Battle of Fort Dearborn. But we won't linger here too long. I know we don't really come here to talk about ancient history, 1812, on a Prairie Avenue tour. We come to talk about the old mansions. So we're going to go, this is down the block from that. On the corner here is the Kimball House, which we'll see in a minute. But this is the 1701 block of North Prairie Avenue. Currently just the site of townhouses and row houses, but there used to be more here. We'll talk about a couple of these. Now, over about where that turret is, the pointy one, would have been 1721, which was the mansion of a guy named Wirt Dexter. Wirt Dexter was a corporate lawyer, also the head of relief organizations after the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, and it was in that place, down on that corner, that he raised his daughter, Catherine Dexter. Catherine Dexter became she was raised really to be a socialite. She attended things like the Mikado Ball that we'll talk about later, all of the social functions here, but it was said that she was really more interested in combing the neighborhood looking for relics of the Battle of Fort Dearborn. And then she eventually went on to become one of the first women to graduate from MIT. Not the first, but one of the first. And she did successfully lobby to change their dress code. They originally had a thing that women had to wear pants that went all the way down to the floor, or skirts that went all the way down to the floor. She got them to change that around and to build more dorms for women, which allowed the women in the classroom there to just about triple, I believe, just in her time. Then she came back to Chicago and married Stanley McCormick of the McCormick family, which was a rich family that wasn't on Prairie Avenue. But Stanley, within a few months of their wedding, suffered a breakdown and spent the rest of his life, like several of the McCormick children, in an asylum. He didn't see her or any woman for 20 years after that. When she eventually came into his money, she used it to almost single-handedly fund the research for the first birth control pill. And she wouldn't have had far to look if she were looking for relics of the battle, at least supposedly not. Frankly, the idea that the battle actually took place right there is a little bit shaky. There are those who say it was someplace else. But right around the corner was this tree that they called the Massacre Tree. And it was a tree that was supposed to still have bullet holes from the battle inside of it. Now, right in the middle of it here was Mr. Pullman's house. Off in the background there you can see the tree. And around here, you know, when we talk about Pullman here on Mysterious Chicago, we kind of make a joke of it. It's almost a running gag that every time I go to his old neighborhood, every time I go to his grave, or in this case, his old house, something bad happens to me. I'll lose stuff. My car will break. Something like that. But George Pullman, who built this mansion, was the founder of the Pullman Palace Car Company. They made railroad cars luxurious. They made them nice. They made them fancy. The house was designed by the architect Solon Beeman, who also did most of the planned neighborhood that Pullman built for his factory workers down on the south side. About 100 blocks south of where we are right now. He also designed the Hotel Florence, the showpiece of the neighborhood right there. So this building, of course, is long gone, so we're just using older pictures of it. But Pullman had more of an interesting life than we might think. Towards the end of his life, he was walking down the road one day, and a guy by the name of Ferdinand Friedrich Gustav Bering came up to him and said, "Father!" And Pullman said, "You are a crazy person," and kept on walking. Apparently, this guy had grown up in Germany. His mother told him on her deathbed that your father is a wealthy American industrialist named George Pullman. And this was right before Pullman died in 1897. So they did encounter each other once, then Bering kept on showing up at the funeral, kept saying, "I don't want to be written into the will, I just want recognition that was my father," which he probably really was not. But the will was not without drama itself. Now, Pullman had a few kids, among them George Jr. and Sanger Pullman. These kids were wild. You occasionally see references that they flunk out of Harvard. It wasn't that Harvard. It was the Harvard School down in Hyde Park, where a generation later, Leopold and Loeb would be students at this school, the thrill killers of the 1920s. I believe they graduated 177 and 178th out of a graduating class of 178. They got kicked out of a number of schools. It is said that nobody at any of the schools could really stand them because they were so arrogant. And Pullman was not unaware of this. When he died, he left them, more or less cut them out of his will. He left them about $3,000 apiece per year, which was a pretty good middle-class income at the time, but certainly not the kind of spending that they were used to. George Jr.'s fiancée immediately dumped him upon hearing the news of this inheritance. He then went on to steal Sanger's fiancée, and there were a couple of little triangles like this. Newspapers made a lot out of these guys. Here's this one line: "It is said that one night's carousal cost the old man Pullman $18,000, and that all this damage was done in one saloon. This rich man's son is only one example of the useless lives of young men raised in luxury." They brought this up quite a bit, especially in 1904 when Sanger was killed in a car wreck. Editorial after another saying, "Let this be a warning to rich men with sons." We won't dwell on him too much here. Let's move on from there, in fact. So, across the street, we'll cross over 18th Street and see one of my favorites of the buildings that is still standing. Now, it used to be this entire street was nothing but mansions like this in the late 1800s. This one was also designed by Solon Beeman, same guy who did all of the Pullman stuff, and quite a few things around here, really. But this was built for William and Ava Kimball. This is the house that Kimball Pianos built. And Mr. Kimball didn't really know much about pianos himself. He just had a bankrupt client pay him with a few pianos. Then he turned around and resold the pianos at a big profit and thought, hey, there's pretty good living in selling pianos. So that's what he did. He became a piano dealer and ended up buying art. Well, his wife mostly bought the art. She was into old masters. She told the kids in the neighborhood now and then she would let them in to see her collection. She told one kid she was trying to get a complete collection of the old masters, which meant one painting by each of the old masters. Probably her most famous is she paid about $100,000 for Rembrandt's Old Man with a Gold Watch Chain, which is now one of the centerpieces of the Art Institute of Chicago. Let me move over to the side of this just a little bit. It's now the United Soccer Federation used this as offices. For a while, it was used as like one of the architectural foundations used it as an office back in the 50s. And even back then, they were telling a story that in the 20s, Al Capone tried to buy the house. That's pretty early for a Capone story. Not so early that I believe it, necessarily. But it's pretty old as these things go. There's a little coach house that was added in the 1940s, and I've never been able to establish for sure, but I've always thought that the look of it was meant to sort of subtly evoke the look of piano keys. The whole style of the thing is an architectural style known as chateau-esque, meaning that it looked kind of like it was what you would imagine a French chateau would look like. That's maybe my favorite in the neighborhood. I love that really gaudy French chateau style myself, but it's such a marked contrast to the place across the street from it. Get a little closer, then slowly veer around to the home of farm equipment Baron J. Glessner, who looked like this. A lot of guys in this neighborhood looked about like that. Jake Glessner lived here with his wife Frances, a prolific diarist, but their house was designed by Henry Hobson Richardson, who, if you look at this picture of him, he looks like Falstaff or something from Shakespeare, and that's about how he acted too. He was just as gregarious as he looks, amazed everybody with his drinking ability, and was one of the first real superstar architects in the United States. He was one of the first guys who had his own really unique, instantly recognizable style of architecture, known as what we call Richardsonian Romanesque. Here's another picture of him. He liked to dress in hooded robes. Now, he said that it was because of his girth, it was just the most comfortable thing, and also it made him look medieval. That tied his architecture into medieval architecture. Great branding on his part. This is a time before architects really thought as much about branding themselves. Now, he also has one other building in Chicago. There's a couple, but my favorite is the Potter Vault at Graceland Cemetery for Steel Baron O.W. Potter and his daughter, the author Margaret Potter. But once again, you can see the same style of big blocks, arches. John Root of Burnham and Root said that the Richardsonian Romanesque style looks like bundles of feathers all tufted together. But at the time, even then, this attracted a lot of notice just because it looked so different from everything else. It wasn't nearly as gaudy as a lot of the others. The Chicago Daily News said, John J. Glessner has moved into his queer-looking mansion, which the great Richardson designed at the corner of 18th and Prairie. This house, which has been taken by the untutored for a stable, a factory, and a bowling alley, is the deceased architect considered one of his best works. Now, Richardson died rather young before this was completed. There is a bit of a ghost story here. They say that they decided they liked it so much they put up a portrait of him, and just so his presence would always be in the house. And they say if they take down the portrait, his ghost will be up and walking around. There are quite a number of ghost stories on Prairie Avenue, but frankly, I don't know of any that don't sound to me like something that somebody might have made up because they had to fill space on a tour, or in an article about local ghost lore or something. But George Glessner, their son, became a photographer. He took pictures like this picture of the massacre tree over down the block from his house. It's still fairly well regarded as a photographer. You can find quite a bit of his stuff online. But let's loop around the other side of here. Now, this one is also run by the Soccer Federation today, but this one is known as the Coleman Ames House. It was built initially by a hardware guy by the name of Joseph Coleman, who only lived there for 2 years. Then it was bought by Minor T. Ames, a coal merchant, whose name was Minor, which is just perfect, who also lived there just a couple of years before dying. So it was only 4 years old in 1890, and had already gone through a couple of different tenants. Now, this one was designed by Henry Ives Cobb, who has been coming up a lot here. He designed a lot of really fantastic mansions in Chicago, and shows, I think, a distinct influence of Henry Hobson Richardson. The same thing with the very large stones is in here. But after a few years, it was eventually purchased by a guy by the name of Joseph Fish. Now, Joseph Fish's wife, Mrs. Fish, was a known socialite. She was a member of an awful lot of Jewish charitable organizations, a big part of Chicago society, big philanthropist. Mr. Fish himself was a fire insurance adjuster. And apparently, one time, a guy named David Korshak came up to Mr. Fish and said, "Fish, I'm David Korshak. I won with this arson ring. I know that you're the one who decides whether to pay out fire insurance claims. Well, I'm here to blackmail you. You are going to pay me X amount of money, or I will tell the cops that you were the head of a whole big arson ring." Now, you really think that the cops would have known better than this. This guy gave them this whole confession saying that Joseph Fish was involved in everything. He was the one who hired us to start the fires. He made sure the money got paid out. He was in charge of everything. And the state took this really, really seriously. In the closing arguments of the trial, they make a whole speech. A blacker villain has never walked the earth than Joseph Fish. He never cared for the damage he did, for the lives that he destroyed, as long as he could make a little bit of money. But the jury at least saw right through it. It just seems to me like the state must have really wanted to pin something on Joseph Fish. But the jury said they noticed right away that the arguments against him were really inconsistent. All of the witnesses were crooks and firebugs, whereas all the witnesses in his favor were fine, upstanding, and respectable people. Now, David Korshak was the uncle of a guy by the name of Sal Korshak, who ended up being one of the biggest lawyers. I think it was Sal Korshak, one of the biggest lawyers for the Chicago outfit. They used to say one call from Korshak and you could shut down all of Las Vegas. But eventually Fish was acquitted, and this was front page extra edition news at the time. Well, really the extra edition was about Germany and Russia peace talks during the early build-up to World War I. But still, extra edition, Fish acquitted was still the big banner headline here. Let's just loop around a little bit. It's always unlikely people that they pin as firebugs. We won't loop around, we'll just move down a very little bit here. Now, these are all newer buildings. For a long time, this was like parking lots and empty spaces, but about 15 years ago, a group called the Resmer Corporations developed this string of townhouses called Mansions on Prairie Avenue. That part of the advertising, it was built to evoke the look of the earlier buildings, which is nice. So this was a house built by a guy named Joseph Sears, not of the Sears mail order catalog. He's the guy who ended up founding the suburb of Kenilworth. But this one was designed by Daniel Burnham, but then heavily remodeled. You can see it here in the big space, and here you can see the Coleman Ames house just to the left there. When Arthur Meeker Sr. bought it. Now, if you were on the mini tour yesterday, we talked a bit about Arthur Meeker Sr. He was an executive with the Armor Corporation, and moved in here with his family in about 1902. You see the two of them together here. So it was here that he raised his young son, Arthur Meeker Jr., along with his wife, Grace Murray Meeker, who had grown up around the neighborhood. She had always been a part of society. This is Arthur as an adult and Grace. Now, by this time, the time this was taken in the 1940s, Grace was always good for a reminisce about the way things were back in the 80s. Like the 1880s. This wasn't like on Facebook. It's like, back in the 80s, we used to rewind our hammer pants and drink from the hose. And Arthur became a travel writer, but also a novelist. He wrote a novel called Prairie Avenue. And the novel is useless for research. He changed everybody's names. He changed everybody's personality. There's no character that you can actually match up to a real person, which is probably smart on his part, but for research is very frustrating. He also did a memoir, though, called Chicago with Love, where he talked a lot about the people on the street that he remembered from when he was a kid. And it's hard to know exactly how reliable his memory was. He was only 9 or 10 when they moved out of the street, but it gives us a lot of the anecdotes that we know about the people around here, about what they were actually like as people. So often what we can find out about them just boils down to their business transactions and the luncheons that they threw. In this case, because of Arthur Meeker Jr., we do have a little bit more going on. And his mother used to call the people who lived in the neighborhood the sifted few. And she specified this didn't mean all of Prairie Avenue, just as far as 22nd Street, which is now Cermak. And also, if you look down on the end of the row here, you can see this building with the pointed turret at the end. That was the Duane House. It was owned by a guy who was the head of a tea company, who it is said to have been the first house in Chicago to have been wired with electric lights. I'm not sure that's exactly true. I'm always really hesitant to say anything is really the first anything. It always turns out there's somebody else with a claim on it. But it was definitely a very early electric house. Speaking of early houses, we will spin around from here just a bit. Still veering away from the sifted few, to what was once upon a time a whole lot of houses, like the Osborne Keith House, another Henry Ives Cobb joint, was right here. But it has now been changed into a park built around what is often said to be Chicago's oldest house that is still standing. It's the Henry B. Clark House from 1836. Now, there is an older house in Norwood Park, but when it was built, it was out in the middle of nowhere, not in Chicago. But this one, the Henry B. Clark House, wasn't built right here either. Originally, it was about 2 blocks north up at 16th in Michigan. But It's now actually in its third location. They moved it to the south side after the Great Chicago Fire, then back up here in the 1970s. So it's in its third location, and so is Henry B. Clark himself. Henry B. Clark himself was a merchant in Chicago who died in the 1849 cholera epidemic. That was one of our really bad cholera years. We had particularly bad waves in 1832, 49, 54, and 66. And cholera kills you pretty quickly, but usually you get at least some warning of it. I won't get into the symptoms. It's not that kind of tour. But he apparently knew he was dying, and by a couple of accounts published reasonably soon thereafter, he said, I don't want to be put in that sandy cemetery where they're burying everybody else. The graves get blown over, and then the next day the coffins are exposed. Just bury me here on the property. So he was buried right up there at about 16th and Michigan for some number of years, but apparently at some point he was moved up to the Old City Cemetery in Lincoln, where Lincoln Park is now. 1864 he was moved to Graceland along with his widow. For years they called this the Widow Clark House, but she died in 1860. Her body was taken back here, I think initially buried right next to him. Then they were both moved to City Cemetery, and then to their third final resting place up at Graceland. And really, just about everybody that I'm going to be talking about on this tour is at Graceland. Just about all of them. Now, it was right after the Great Chicago Fire in 1872, about a year after the fire, they moved this way down to 45th Street, somewhere in the 40s, just because they thought it would be safer from fire down there. Then in 1970, they took it apart, hauled it onto some flatbed trucks, and moved it to where it is now, despite the fact that they had to go through a lot of difficulties trying to get the thing over the L tracks. That's a fun little tidbit about it, that they had to get it over the L tracks. But let's move over to the side of it. It was also mansions all the way down to the left of it as well back in the old days. The house there is now a museum. This is mostly empty space over here, but here's what it would have looked like in the late 1800s if we were looking straight down the street. Here's a thing called a bird's eye view from 1898. What we're going to talk about here really is, well, 1828 was Daniel B. Shipman, another Graceland resident. 1834 was a guy by the name of Fernando Jones, and we'll match up his house right here. It looked about like this. Would have been standing right about here. And Fernando Jones was one of the founders of the Chicago Title and Trust Company, a banker, essentially. Banker and real estate guy, but he initially came to Chicago when he was about 15 years old, around 1830, back when there was really pretty much nobody here. And when he was an old man, he had an awful lot of stories about the old days that I'm not always 100% sure were reliable, but they started referring to him as Chicago Incarnate. I'm guessing he told them that headline himself. Here's some pictures of his adventures from the time he turned 90. Up on the left is the time that he killed a wolf on Dearborn Street, something that he never stops talking about. And on the right, how he taught the Potawatomi not to be afraid of Halley's Comet. That's the way he told it anyway. He claimed to speak the Potawatomi language. He talked a lot about this. He is also the guy who claimed to have discovered the massacre tree that we talked about a few minutes ago, which incidentally, I forgot to mention, is no longer there. It got wrecked in a storm in the 1890s. But Fernando Jones also claimed that he was, if you look at this picture that we saw earlier of Chicago in 1832, he was occasionally known to claim that he was the guy in the left on the canoe. Doesn't look like him to me. And if you've been on several of my tours, you might be familiar with David Kennison, the guy who claimed that he was 115 years old and the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party. He had a vial of tea leaves that he even said were from Boston. Fernando Jones is the guy that he gave those tea leaves to, which makes them even less reliable. We now know David Kennison was lying through his teeth. He wasn't anywhere near as old as he said he was, but he was friends with Fernando Jones. He was one of Chicago's first and most interesting con artists and a vocal abolitionist, which quite in contrast to the next guy we're going to cover here. So here was the house again. Now, towards the 1880s, Fernando Jones decided he was going to go traveling in Europe for a while. Meanwhile, there was a guy in town who comes up quite a bit around here named Wilbur F. Story, editor of the Chicago Times, the Copperhead newspaper during the Civil War, the pro-South paper. A couple of his less offensive headlines are, here's News from White Manville, and Abolitionism necessarily growing worse and worse. This guy really, really hated abolitionists. He railed about how they were all intolerant. He called the Emancipation Proclamation the wickedest deed in the annals of history. This is just a start. But towards the end, this guy started to lose what marbles he had, started hearing voices in his head telling him to build himself this massive castle down on what was 47th and Grand at the time. It's 47th and MLK today, which he would just hate. But while that was being built, he needed a place to stay. Fernando Jones was going to Europe for a year or so Wilbur F. Story ended up renting that house. And Fernando Jones ended up staying in Europe for 3 years. But when he got back, the Story Mansion was still under construction. And Jones knew that because he had been getting letters from Story dictated by the voices in his head, mostly about how bad the house smelled. He thought he was trying to hypnotize him with sewer gas or something like that. So when Jones got back, Story refused to leave. So it was actually on this spot, in this house, that Wilbur F. Story died. And you all know what I think about Wilbur F. Story being dead. Here's me dancing on his grave. That was something I learned while I was doing this tour. I never realized that he died right here in this space of Prairie Avenue. But we'll move down just a bit more from here. I mentioned earlier this might be one of the longer tours. Normally I try to have a tour be about 40-45 minutes or so. This one, there's just so much stuff. This is going to be kind of a supersized one. Got a bit more. A little further down the block would have been the home of Samuel Allerton, the founder of the Union Stockyards, who, when his wife died, he married his wife's sister. They had, which was not that uncommon with marriages like that were kind of unusual marriages were common with this set. But his son Robert was sometimes referred to as the most eligible bachelor in town, but he's also down in history himself. He's generally said to have been half of the first legally recognized same-sex partnership. He wasn't allowed to marry his partner, but the judge let him adopt him. So what we've come to here down the block is maybe my favorite. I love this house. Just add bats and you've got a perfect Scooby-Doo look here. So this was the home of a guy by the name of Elbridge Keith, who looks a lot like Mr. Glessner that we saw back before. And he, along with his brothers, ran a fur and hat company, Keith Brothers. We already talked about Osborne Keith's house, which was a little ways down the block. And just on the left, right next door, was his brother Edson. So all in a row, just like they are at Graceland Cemetery now, we've got Edson Keith, Elbridge Keith, and Osborne Keith. Though then Fernando Jones would have been in the middle of them. They weren't all right in a row. But this is what it looked like back at the time. That would have been Fernando Jones's house on the right. Edson Keith's is on the left. Elbridge, the one that's still standing, is right there. I did find one when I was looking up stuff about them, I found a couple of stories about the Keith house getting robbed every now and then back in the day. The thing about these balconies and porches and ornamentation is, like the one we saw this morning, made it easy to climb up and sneak into second-story windows. I did notice this one ad. Man with reference experiences window trimmer and floor walker for Madison, Wisconsin. Jewish preferred. Not sure what they were going on about there, but whatever. This is what Edson Keith looked like himself. But then one day in 1906, Edson Keith walked out of his house and just kept on walking, would have walked right to where the lake is now. A little while later, Edson's hat and coat were found around the docks. This became a big story. What had become of Edson Keith? Eventually, they were able to locate the body. And this became a big question, like, why would a guy this rich kill himself? And you run into this quite a bit when there was a millionaire suicide. They always think, well, maybe he wasn't really that rich. Maybe it was his health. In this case, they decided it was temporary insanity brought about by persistent headaches. Which maybe it was, but something you notice in a lot of these old articles about rich people who kill themselves is the Victorian ignorance of mental health, just in general, is on full display. Deciding it was headaches was more comfortable to people than the uncomfortable notion that maybe being a millionaire doesn't save you from things like depression or mental health. We'll move just a bit down from then. Just in front of them is this little space. Now, this little thing blocking the middle, when they redid the street a while back, they got this dome thing from an architectural relic company that said it used to be on some church in Chicago. That is regarded as rather dubious. Nobody could ever trace which church it was. It looks like it's in too good of shape to have been outside for several decades. But in any case, it's just a nice looking thing. That's all we can really say about it. But right back behind it would have been the home of Marshall Field, the department store kingpin. And I'm going to make this picture a little bit bigger for a second. Look in front of it. There's some guys going by on an old-fashioned bicycle. Or some kind of old-fashioned bike. I love that bit. Those little tidbits that you see just every now and then in these old pictures. I'll put this about the right size and about where it would have been so we can imagine what it would have looked like. And here's Marshall Field himself, and it was probably the last photo taken of him. He lived here initially with his wife, Nanny Field, along with his son, Marshall Field Jr., his daughter, Ethel Field. Now, this was the site. Marshall Field was not the most popular guy personality-wise. He was the kind of guy who seemed like he was born at the age of 55, didn't really have any particularly close friends, wasn't known to smile very often, never seemed to have much fun. So it's kind of an odd space for one of Chicago's most famous parties. In 1885, right, just a little after Christmas, they hosted a thing called the Mikado Ball. Now, Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado was the biggest thing in the world at the time, so having a Mikado-themed party was a really, was very of-the-moment thing to do. So everybody came in costumes that, of course, would be horribly problematic now. But in the middle here is Alice Keith, who I believe was Osborne Keith's daughter. But all the kids from the neighborhood were here. Catherine Dexter McCormick was here when she was still just Catherine Dexter. Grace Murray, the later Grace Murray Meeker was here. The Pullman kids were here, including the wild and crazy Pullman twins. But even while this was going on, well, this was reported to have cost, well, if you look up any article about it now, they always say that it cost $75,000, which would have been an unbelievable amount of money at a time when most of his employees made about $10 a week. The Cash Boys made about $2 a week. Now, in point of fact, it was said at the time the people were estimating that it was about as much as $50,000, $10,000 on decorations alone. The Chicago Daily Inter-Ocean said the real cost was about $5,000. Now, if you adjust that for inflation, it's probably about $75,000 in today's money. But in any case, a lot of money. But even while this was going on, Marshall was married to Nanny Field, who mentioned before, but by this time he'd probably already been having a 10-year affair with Delia Caton, whose husband Arthur Caton lived in the house directly behind theirs over on Calumet Avenue. There were persistent rumors of a tunnel connecting the two houses. The two of them had been fairly openly having an affair for quite some time at this point. And apparently everybody in the neighborhood knew about it. Their spouses were honestly fine with it. But after Nanny Field died, the affair continued until Arthur Caton, Delia's husband, died. Because, a divorce was still kind of shocking at the time. There would have been all of the legal complications with it. So instead, they just carried on having an affair for about another 15 or 20 years until Arthur died, at which point they were finally married. But only for a few months before Marshall himself died. And also, one thing I found when I was looking up the kind of parties they had here. Now, Arthur Meeker Jr. described a lot of the parties in the neighborhood. Most of them sound frightfully dull to me. It was mostly just dancing parties. But there were a few references in the press to a period in the 1880s when all of a sudden the big thing was imaginary fox hunts. All of these people would get on hobby horses and ride around these giant mansions pretending they were hunting for a fox. I'm kind of guessing that Marshall Field did not participate. It really wouldn't have been his scene. But I love the caption of this. This is from Police Gazette, one of the funniest newspapers ever. The way they do it in Chicago. Yep, that's the way we do it in Chicago. We'll move just a little down from here. Just a couple of doors down, this enormous place was the Marshall Field Jr. Mansion. That kid for whom the Mikado Ball was thrown at 17 ended up having his own place down here. And this one is another Solon Spencer Beamer piece of architecture. Now, you might have seen on some of our tours, when we do the Graceland Cemetery tours, we often go to the Huck Mausoleum. The Huck Mausoleum was for a guy by the name of John Huck, whose daughter Albertine, of his three daughters, one daughter married a German count, one daughter married an Italian marquis, and the third, Albertine, married Marshall Field Jr. And meanwhile, when her mother died, her father, Lewis Huck, married her own best friend, so her childhood best friend was now her stepmother. But she lived here with Marshall Field Jr. and their two sons, Henry and Marshall III. This was also the site of one of Chicago's most famous mysteries. One day in late 1905, just after his father's wedding, Marshall was found inside of this place, bleeding from a shotgun wound to the abdomen. Now, the official story was that he had been cleaning a pistol and it accidentally went off. He was planning to take it hunting in Wisconsin, but there were a couple of stories. One that it was a suicide, possibly despondency over his father's recent marriage, which doesn't add up to me, as it's not like he wouldn't have known that his father had been having that affair with Mrs. Caton for decades and decades by now. The other story that went around was that Marshall had been at the Everleigh Club, the fanciest brothel in town. Arthur Meeker Jr. was about 3 years old at the time, but said he remembered Mr. Field Jr. getting into a car that afternoon. So what I've done here is I've got a time-lapse video. The Everleigh Club, the fanciest brothel in town, was looked about like this at the time. So here's a bit of a time-lapse video of if he would have taken a car, but it was really very close by. So we'll walk by here. Here's a few buildings we'll see on Cullerton in a minute. Quick view of the skyline. Here's the Second Presbyterian Church, where a lot of these people went to church. Has 9 Tiffany windows and a new interior by Howard Van Doren Shaw on the inside. And then just as we get over here, linger for a second while I'm crossing safely. Sears Tower in the background. And here it is, right where these Bertrand Goldberg designed senior living apartment complexes are now. This was the original site of the Everleigh Club. And appropriately enough, when I got there the other day to film this time-lapse, there was a pair of phantom underpants on the ground. Highly appropriate. Stranger than that, I'm wearing an identical pair right now. So, naturally, Marshall Field made it known that if anybody said his son's death was from anything other than an accident, he would pull all of their advertising. But the Chicago American already didn't get his advertising, so they felt free to just go along with absolutely everything. They showed a picture of the pistol, they interviewed the butler. They didn't exactly come out and say they thought he was shot at the fancy Everleigh Club, but they pretty much did. These were his two sons, who are now heir to the Marshall Field fortune, especially just a couple of months later when Marshall Field Sr. was out golfing with Robert Todd Lincoln when he was struck down sick and died a couple of days later. So, at this point, the press started referring to Marshall Field III as the most interesting boy in the world. This most interesting boy in the world ended up moving his mother, Albertine, ended up moving them over to England, where she eventually married a captain in the British Navy. Field III eventually affected a perfect British accent. Kind of lost my place here. Henry and Marshall, the most interesting boy. Then Marshall III ended up joining fighting in World War I, came back and worked as an investment banker, lived kind of the Great Gatsby lifestyle for a while, then got into publishing newspapers. Initially, he published one called PM that early on wouldn't even take advertising because they were just that into ethics, and eventually came here to take over the Chicago Times and the Sun, which became the Sun-Times and then the Daily News, as a more liberal counterpart to the then arch-conservative Chicago Tribune, which had gone back and forth for a while. But Henry is a whole other story. Right around the time their mother died in England, Henry had impregnated a chorus girl, told her, "It's okay, I'm going to go over to the United States, then I'll send for you there." Went over to the United States and got engaged to somebody else. On his wedding day, he agreed to pay this chorus girl off, but then just days after his wedding day, he died himself. Henry III apparently bought the woman off for $100,000. She had been dating a guy now who was apparently a German spy, but after she got that $100,000, she just disappeared off of the records. There's another Henry Field out there someplace. Then we'll move down the block a little ways. I've sped this one up and get back over to, we'll go a little bit off-road to these 3 cool houses on Cullerton Street. The Cullerton 3. The one on the right is 213 Cullerton, which in the 1940s was occupied by a guy by the name of Morelli. Now, Fred Morelli took over for Hinky Dink Kenna's old job as a Democratic city councilman, You can see here he's walking past Colosimo's old cafe, Big Jim Colosimo's old place. And Morelli's real job was he was in charge of what was called the jukebox racket. Now, when jukeboxes became a really big thing in the 40s and 50s, there was a lot of money to be made here, not entirely legally. You could get payoffs from people who were trying to build up an artist's career. It was really, really easy to falsify the data of how many coins had gone into that jukebox, so you could skim money off the top really easily. Mike Royko wrote, reminiscing about this, the new first ward political boss will be Fred Morelli, who was a protege of the big vice operator and later got into the jukebox business. The first ward was his juke territory. You didn't have to get a jukebox from Morelli if you didn't want to. Not at all. You could provide your customers canary music instead. And this got to be a very fiercely competitive business. People got killed over the jukebox things every now and then. Now, over on the left-hand side, the one on the left, lived a couple named the Gibsons, J.J. and May M. Gibson. J.J., May lived there later on in life, for most of her older adult life, but in the 1890s, these two had been the official studio photographers of the World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition. They took pictures like studio posed portraits of the Turkish diplomats, of the belly dancers. But shortly after the World's Fair, J.J. Gibson died. May continued to work in the arts and photography business, but at the same time, she got herself involved in a big love triangle. She was sued by this woman. Lewis J. Highland, a construction engineer, had been visiting her a lot. Then when Lewis divorced his wife, that wife tried to sue May, saying, I tried to get her to stay away from my husband, and she said, it's just business. I'll see your husband as much as I want. But then ended up getting engaged to the guy as soon as he got divorced. This did not really work out in her favor too well. Eventually, she ended up suing the guy for breach of promise herself. Here's a cool thing. The inquiring photographer would go around to people now and then. He asked her, what do you think of Chicagoans? She said, I have always found Chicagoans considerate, and I have been dealing with the Chicago public ever since the dedication of the World's Fair of 1893. I was the official portrait photographer at that beautiful exposition. She liked the fair so much, she just stayed in the city. I think a lot of people did. And later on in life, she formed an organization called the Association of 93ers. These were old fair veterans, people who had worked at the fair, people who had been involved in the fair, now about 50 years in the past, where they would just get together and reminisce about how great the World's Fair of 1893 had been, saying things like, and weren't we the lucky ones that we got to see it? We'll move on from there a bit. I told you guys this one might go a little bit over. You can see here, this was an old publishing house. A lot of those ended up getting built here in the 1920s as the neighborhood started to decline. As the old people moved out or died off or moved up north, their kids didn't want the old mansion, so they ended up getting converted into rooming houses and things. There's one on the left right here was the home of a guy named William Henry Reed, who got his start working in a wholesale drug company that got swindled by H.H. Holmes 7 years after he left to go work in a bank instead, which is a shame because that would have been one good thing that he could have put in his autobiography. Now, this guy published an autobiography. It is about 45 pages. Half of them are blank, and the blank pages are not notably less interesting than the stuff that he actually wrote. The first half of it is mostly vague reminiscences about what the big news of the year was. The next half is mostly his bank's financial records. It is honestly the single most boring autobiography I think I have ever read. Luckily, it's nice and short. The first half of it is just like a recounting of news events. It's like a boring version of We Didn't Start the Fire. Like Stephen Douglas, Civil War, Andrew Johnson, I'm a bore, we didn't start the fire. So we won't concern ourselves with William Henry Reed too much. We will just move down to the Harriet Reese house. In its new location, used to be further down the block. We'll cover that in a minute. But originally owned by a woman named Harriet Reese. But then it was bought by Edson Keith Jr., Edson Keith's son, who raised his daughter Catherine here. Now, Catherine, when she grew up, became a novelist. She wrote a couple of books, one called The Girl and one called The Crystal Icicle. And I guess The Crystal Icicle is all about Chicago. I couldn't track down a copy of that one. The Girl you can get on Google Books. Crystal Icicle was late enough that it's not quite in the public domain yet. But she wound up marrying an architect named David Adler, who is best known for designing country houses, but also worked with Howard Van Doren Shaw, who's already come up once today, and designed little touches like in the Field Building, which is now the Bank of America building, and turns up on the Architecture of Mysterious Chicago tour. The top 2 floors are a place called the Attic Club. This is a stairway he built up to there in this design that I just find is absolutely stunning. It's a staircase, but it looks like a really awesome water slide. Now, Catherine probably had a pretty good career as a novelist in front of her, but just a couple of months after that book came out, she died in a car wreck in France. And she is not the only person that I'll get to on this tour who died in a car wreck in France. It's a weird thing. Now, at one time, this used to be a couple of blocks further down. For a while, it was a place called the Prairie Cafe, seen here in a postcard. Then in 2014, they needed new room for the Wintrust Arena, and so moved the entire house to the location where it is right now. Now, of the house that used to be in this spot, I could only find a picture from the side here. But the house that used to be in this spot was owned by Mrs. H.O. Stone. Now, H.O. Stone was one of the early Chicago guys who showed up when people still dressed like Davy Crockett. And he himself comes up quite a bit. He came to Chicago in the 1830s. Then when he was about 40 years old, he went back to his hometown, met a 16-year-old named Frances Pierce and married her. She died of tuberculosis, but he had a statue built for her that is now at Rose Hill Cemetery, and is a highlight of just about every Rose Hill Cemetery, too. Tour. So H.O. Stone then went back to his hometown again and found another 16-year-old to marry, and that was Mrs. H.O. Stone. Now, Arthur Meeker Jr. remembered her as a very prim and proper lady. Now, by the time she moved into this house, her husband was long dead. Being that much younger, she outlived him considerably. But she was a very prim and proper person, but she did host a party here for Oscar Wilde. And this reception, Marshall Field attended this party. So we've got one of the most flamboyant and humorous people of the era meeting one of the least flamboyant and humorous people of the era. And apparently Mrs. H.O. Stone was not exactly a flamboyant and humorous person herself. So it must have been a really interesting party. Well, from newspaper accounts, he mostly just held forth about how England was different from America. Pretty safe topics. But we'll move down from here a bit. And I'll speed this one up a little, this part. Just a little further down is the new Wintrust Arena and the Marriott. Right on the left would have been Philip Armour's house, the Armour hot dogs guy. And then further down, about 5 blocks further down, but right here you get to Cermak, which used to be 22nd Street. So right below this, you get to the end of what Mrs. Meeker would have called the sifted few. Across the street, it was all very different. But there were also plenty of rich people down on the other side of the street, like Henry Getty, half of the Ryerson Lumber Company, who now has this fantastic Louis Sullivan-designed tomb, lived at 25th and Prairie, 5 blocks down, with his daughter Alice, who eventually became a Buddhist art expert, a noted composer, had a manuscript burned by the Nazis, one story after another with her, but she's a little further down. And of course, if you go another 50 blocks further south, you get to Al Capone's house, as seen here. But at the time of the turn of the 20th century, when Arthur Meeker was a kid in the area, just on our left here would have been a skating rink, and right across the street where the parking place is now was this really cool Tudor-style building that was a photography studio run by a guy by the name of Commodore Stevens, where even though it was on the other side of 22nd Street, all of the high society people went there to have their portraits taken. Here's one of his portraits of Bertha Palmer of the Palmer House. And he was the one who took this Marshall Field portrait right before he died, probably the last photograph of him. Now, this is the part I've been nervous about coming up here, is in 1921, Commodore Stephens was in the news himself talking about the girl who lived next door to his studio at 2205. He was at 2203, and used to come over and play a lot in the early days of the 20th century, who was then named Virginia Rapp, but she added an E to her name to make it Virginia Rappé. 1908, she was considered one of the great up-and-coming models in Chicago. By 1915, she was designing clothes herself, like this submarine hat that was for when you were out driving. She also modeled the women's tuxedo, which I believe she also designed, before moving out to Hollywood later on. But that's where she became most famous. Unfortunately, she's most famous for dying is what happened, is in 1921, she went to a party in San Francisco after some time alone in her room with Roscoe Arbuckle, the comedian. Her bladder ruptured. She died 4 days later. It was Hollywood's first really big scandal. Trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened is probably completely impossible at this point. All I can really do is refer you to a book called Room 1219 that does a really good job of sifting through which parts are urban legends and how those legends developed, what we know and what we don't. And it's, but we shouldn't really just be remembering her for how she died anyway. So here's a bit of a clip of a 1918 movie she was in with Rudolph Valentino called The Isle of Love. Now, by all accounts, this is a terrible movie. It is actually a recut of another movie. They just took an old movie, cut it up, and added different intertitles to try to make a whole new story. By all accounts, not at all successfully, but the look of her, she has a great way of smoldering in these shots. Not too much of her work survives, but we should remember her for her work more than her death anyway. That's her with Rudolph Valentino. And incidentally, there was a Rudolph Valentino movie at the same time called The Sheik. And The Sheik was showing in New Haven, Connecticut one day. The proprietor of the theater decided to make it really come alive by lighting a bunch of incense during a harem scene. The theater caught fire. Last person to run in and out of the building, running into the fire to take people out, was Alan Keith, a grandson of Elbridge Keith, whose last words were reported to be, "Mother, I think I was the last one out," and that is on his epitaph at his tombstone now. And we're going to move over backwards again. Going back down Cullerton to check out one of the better industrial buildings that came up here in the 1920s. This is R.R. Donnelly's publishing company. It's one of the biggest publishing company buildings at the time, and it was designed by Howard Van Doren Shaw, who again has come up a couple of times. This is what Cullerton Street looked like when it was under construction. I love this picture. It's just such a perfect example of how the neighborhood was changing in the 1920s. Now, all of these houses down below me here, all these houses on Cullerton, these ornate mansions, would have been hopelessly old-fashioned to people in the 1920s. Like Arthur Meeker Jr., writing in the 1940s, said, "We must admit that at the turn of the 20th century, taste in America was as bad as it's ever been." He thought all of these houses were just gross. He called Potter Palmer's mansion a liver-colored goldfish bowl. But everything was kind of falling out of fashion, so instead they started building industrial things around here. The neighborhood really fell into a deep decline over the years. People said that the few mansions left were like the teeth left over in a mouth that just had the rest of the teeth knocked out. But there's still one more that survives that we can cover. And I'm a bit over time by now, but I warned you. So we'll move just a little ways up the block. I'll speed things up a bit. For this absolutely gorgeous, recently restored mansion was on the market as recently as the 1990s for only about $10,000. Must have needed an awful lot of work. But you can really look at like the way that the property values of the neighborhood changed. At the turn of the 20th century, it was going for something like $1,000 per frontage foot. And then in 1930, it was going for $30 per frontage foot. But this is known as the Wheeler Cone Mansion, built by a guy named Calvin Wheeler, then occupied by a guy named John A. Cone for a while. In the old addresses, it was 2018 Calumet. Now they've gone with 2020, and this is something that can trip you up in research. Sometimes people kind of go their own way as to what the actual address of a place was. This place was initially sold to Mr. Cone in 1874 for $63,000. That's a really big chunk of money at the time. 1908, this place was a boarding house. Then in the 1960s, it became a butter and egg company, butter and egg warehouse. But here's something cool I found looking it up. They used to have these things, the inquiring reporter, like May Gibson talks to once. But this is back before they could afford the photographs for it. 1920, the inquiring reporter was asking, Will Mary Pickford's divorce injure her reputation as a moving picture actress? And we scroll down, there's a person who is living here at the boarding house named Miss Peggy Davis. Says, I knew Mary when I was in the movies. She's as clean and pure as any girl ever was. She has always had good roles, and her pictures usually leave a good taste. Her admirers won't be worried by the publicity, and Mary doesn't care about those who don't love her. Movie fans will always call her the sweetest girl in the world. Now, Peggy Davis had been in a couple of movies a few years before. Now, I've had trouble verifying that it's the same Peggy Davis. There were a couple of Peggy Davises around, but as near as I can tell, this is probably the same one, who later became a vamp in the Ziegfeld Follies. Mr. Ziegfeld's father, incidentally, is at Graceland Cemetery with all the rest of these people. But she had a career off and on the stage throughout the 1920s. Then in the late 1920s, she got married, moved to France, and apparently despondent over the notion that they were running out of money and she might have to go on stage, she drove her car off of a cliff variously given as being 500 or 200 feet down. And it was a bit of a mystery. They later found a men's overcoat in the wreckage too, which changed things around a bit. Maybe there was a man in the car with her. Her husband never believed it was a suicide. It might very well have been an accident. But also she had a briefcase full of letters that they decided not to open. They just buried it with her in France. Some people said this was the Follies curse. A lot of people who were in the Ziegfeld Follies review in New York ended up having strings of bad luck or dying early deaths. But that brings us right to the end here. I hope everything's gone on all of the platforms properly. But let me go ahead and plug some of the upcoming stuff. On Sunday, we've got the virtual architectural boat tour coming up. It's going to be chilly, where the weather's going back down to cold, but for a virtual tour, you don't have to worry about that. Nobody's going to try to sell you a picture of yourself. No high-priced drinks, no paying to park. You can all just be right back on here. Then on Thursday, a week from today, we do these every Thursday night. We've been doing them on the Facebook for a long time, and now we're trying out the software to have it simulcast over on YouTube and on Twitch. Thursday night will be one of my classic tours called Grave Robbing 101. This is one that I do as a walking tour in both Chicago and New York in more normal times. But when I do it virtually, I can combine stories from both of those. And over here on Mysterious Chicago's Facebook page, we do mini tours every day, Monday through Saturday. Sunday's a full-length tour, including tomorrow will be Find a Grave Friday. That's when we go to a cemetery where I know a particular person is buried, but I don't look up quite where he is or where they are, or what the grave looks like. We figure it out in the comments and play hot and cold. I know who I'm looking for tomorrow. It's one that I expect will be pretty easy, and I need it to be pretty easy because I got a delivery guy coming. I shouldn't be away from the house too terribly much. And on Friday evenings at 6:30, we do the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page called a show called Whiskey and a Cookie, in which Patty and friends, including myself, drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. If you want a Mysterious Chicago t-shirt, coffee mug, flask, etc., that is all at cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. You can check that out right over there. And with that, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours, and with that, I will put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out like always. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Lee, I'm not sure I can stream the Find a Grave Friday on YouTube yet. I haven't found an app that works for mobile yet, that works reliably. Still testing that. Susan, you got it. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, June. This was a really fun one to put together. I knew if I dug hard enough at each address, I could probably find a pretty good scandal. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Judy. And check out this cool thing here, too. You can also, if you got the Cash App thing, you can just hold it up with and scan that thing. Thanks, Sandra. Now, they moved a couple of those houses. I can't believe they pulled that off. No, Sarah, Venmo will not let you pay me anymore. They got wind of the raffles, and now they think I'm a gambling kingpin. And that's why there's all these other options are up here. Thanks, Trisha. Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Ronald. Mary, I am drinking Jepson's Bourbon Single Barrel number Z31. We're the Laughlin Mansion. I know the Laughlin Memorial Building. I can't remember offhand where the mansion was. I know where his grave is, and I know where the memorial building is. Is the Zelle not working either? The Zelle should be working. Just go to Adam@MysteriousChicago.com. It worked as early as earlier today. And I lost an eBay auction. It's looking like no more book raffles, no. But Zelle should be working. You can try that address, or if that one doesn't work, try adam.selzer@gmail. No, PayPal is not going to be working either. That's the same company as... The PayPal one there might work. I just put that one up today. Okay, so if that PayPal isn't working, it's a brand new one that I tried today, kind of sneaky-like. And Mary, yeah, you'll be able to replay this as soon as it's done. Alright, if that PayPal's not working, I'm going to really quick and sneaky-like try to fix up my, fix up this thing. See if this works. Ta-da! Right now, also the Eventbrite thing on the Facebook events that'll have the tickets thing, you can also donate through that. Eventbrite works just fine. But the usual ones, the Venmo and the PayPal, won't be working right now. Where was the rich neighborhood after the decline of Prairie Avenue, Kirk asked. That was the Gold Coast, just north of the Loop. Why Graceland? No, there really wasn't a much closer cemetery. Oak Woods on the south side would have been about equidistant. But I guess one of them bought one at Graceland. They all had to buy one at Graceland. The Patreon's a good option. You get a lot of stuff on the Patreon. I'll probably have to stop the free tickets thing on it pretty soon. I know people are building up quite a bit, but just the paperwork of keeping track of it all might become overwhelming pretty soon. Phyllis, no, I don't believe that particular Adler is associated with the planetarium. I don't think, but I'd have to double check on that. And Natalie, it looks like the new PayPal one isn't working right now, so I had to take it down. But it was, the idea was tip at MysteriousChicago.com. But they thought that the raffles we were holding occasionally here, where I'd pick a random tipper for a free book, may be a gambling kingpin. And in the middle of the night, they shut down my accounts. Tony, yes, they did once hold a spiritualist convention at the Keith House. And the woman who owns it told me, off the record, yeah, they do occasionally still find bodies buried around there, probably from the battle. I'm getting mixed reports on whether the Zelle is working. Do I have a typo on here? Why did Prairie Avenue decline in status? Partly just because people started moving out and they couldn't find a buyer for the places. People with enough money to have a place like that wanted to build their own. and it wasn't quite the status of living there anymore, so the places started turning into rooming houses or just getting torn down. Yeah, if you check on the Facebook, the address that it gives on Ogden Avenue, that's a P.O. box. You can send things there as well. Thanks, Patty. It's like, if I'm a gambling kingpin, shouldn't I have a bigger place than this? Shouldn't I have one of these big, disgusting mansions? Well, speaking of getting things in the mail, I don't know if Deanna Kaler is out there, but Donna Kaler. Donna sent me this awesome woodcut box that I'm going to use for keeping all of the cards people have sent me about these tours. This is just incredible. I haven't run across her online. I need to just send a proper note, I guess. The old-fashioned way. Yeah, but Marcia, it's pretty spacious here, but I don't have tunnels. I need tunnels and vaults.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
But, you know, I can understand why they thought this looked like I might be running a gambling operation and wanted to cover their own butts. But they could have given me a warning. Or a 30-day suspension I'd accept with some despair. Now, the champagne sink guy was up in River North. What happened to the house he was building? It was eventually torn down and used to build other houses. This giant white marble thing, nobody ever wanted to move into it. It was never quite finished at the time of his death. So they used it to build other houses. And all over Bronzeville, there are houses that have like a marble ornamentation or a marble stoop. Hard to know for sure, but it might very well be the wreck of Old Man Story's castle. Now, the one to send a Zelle to, the thing you should be trying to send is adam@mysteriouschicago.com. We'll find Miles in a second. Now, nobody ratted on me. They just saw the words raffle and entry too many times. Literally, how did Chicago reduce the swampland? That I don't know. That's the kind of landscape engineering I'm not really educated on. Thanks, Ava. Oh yeah, Marty, I've done some stuff in Savannah. The P.O. Box address, if you look at just like the Mysterious Chicago front page or the About info, it'll have something about Ogden Avenue. That's the address. Mary, yeah, we also re-engineered... The river is practically man-made. Early references to it refer to it as a creek.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo.
All right, thanks, Lee. Ronnie's book's about to come out in paperback, too. She just got the paperback copies in the mail. Her author copies. Yeah, I got to admit, too, the raffles, financially, the raffles worked out well for me. I'm going to miss them. And hopefully we can find out ways to fix all of this stuff, but it's a hit, there's no doubt about it. Let me go see if I can find... Ronnie's book is called When the Stars Lead to You. That's my wife's book. Let me go find Miles. Miles is right over here. Miles? everywhere you go. Each time of day, Leland sings it, Valley sings it, Wiseman rings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Gail, I would say so, yeah. They didn't actually check on what I was doing, they just saw keywords. And we could try a code word or something somewhere along the line, but it won't be on PayPal or Venmo, apparently. So I talked to PayPal on the phone a bit today, and the person said, yeah, I can see that's clearly a misunderstanding, but once they sent you this letter, there's no appeals. Now, I heard about the group that calls them waffles. Or giveaway is what it really is, anyway.
And we'll let the title speak for itself.
Mary, we don't know if he's a Russian blue. A Mysterian has sent us a DNA test. We keep forgetting to send it in. Now, I don't think anybody's had to call 1-800-BETS-OFF because of Mysterious Chicago. Yeah, there probably aren't going to be as many comments on Twitch or anything else right now. Because we've got a large built-in following here on Facebook. Twitch and YouTube are brand new, so they'll pick things up as we go. Well, really, most of the merch is Miles merch. He is right there on the logo. Thanks, Jordana. The YouTube account is just my name, Adam Selzer. I might try to move it over to Mysterious Chicago. Well, yeah, if you pre-order on Eventbrite, that will also get you reminder emails that the tour is about to start with more how to watch instructions if you still need those. Jenny, right you are. Hey, Audrey. Ow, Miles, no. And Miles is a very happy kitty right now. Here, Miles. Let's sit like this. How about it? How about this? Mm-hmm.
And here's a short encore portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program.
Marty, it's too hot in here to wear a jacket. It's not that bad outside, but I haven't brought the air conditioners up yet and the window's not open. I was roasting yesterday. Not as bad today. Okay, Miles, hop on down.
And presenting the music.
Thanks, Judy.
And his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Amy. Let me rewind the Benny over here. What do the numbers get up to today? One thing about this setup is I can't see the numbers in real time. Any cool Chicago history that involves cats? I bet I could. There was one about there was a cat that was at the jail that was always known to start yowling and howling when there was a hanging coming up. Yeah, good numbers tonight. Probably would have been a good one. Financially, I mean. It looks like we didn't quite break 800, it looks like. We got pretty close. So that's good numbers. Sorry for those of you who are trying these new options and it's not helping out. Now for Twitch, I just signed up on Twitch. I'm not going to have too many people following me there right now. All right, those are good numbers then. So we got about 860 people watching. That's good numbers. That's the best we've had in a while, really. Paula, the P.O. Box address, if you look at like the info page on Facebook, it's 516 North Ogden, number 142, Chicago 60642. Honestly, Twitch is mostly for watching people play video games. I guess people do other stuff on it too. When I try to like add tags and stuff, the tags are all for games. And the categories are all for games. Donna, I can't use Venmo anymore. I wish I could. It's how I pay my rent. Bella, I can't tell you. But you know I can't stay away for long, so there's a couple close by me. It'll probably be one of those. Yeah, I haven't done much on Twitch. Right before we started this, I was on Clubhouse talking with a bunch of puppet people. Jordana, you would have loved it. My friend of mine who works on Sesame Street sent me a message for it. And my landlord doesn't want rent the old-fashioned way. For years, rent was the one check that I actually wrote per month anymore. Kathleen, that's maybe what I'll do. Tina, you don't know MST3K? Mystery Science Theater 3000. Mary, yeah, I'm trying some new stuff, you know, with the shake-up that I got from PayPal and Venmo today. Or this week. I had to try something. I figured, why don't I just try other new stuff while I'm trying to fix everything else? Why don't I make this a little more stressful? Then they forgot to deliver my sandwich for dinner tonight. It's one of those days, man. In the middle of the tour, I lost the eBay auction I was bidding on for a Muppet Babies animation cell. I lost it bad, too. It was such a good one, though. Oh, man, it was a good one. But I'm depressed. I loved Venmo. I loved paying for stuff with Venmo. It was like my favorite platform. Yeah, Kathleen, I've been going through scrambling trying to fix all of the stuff that I use for PayPal for my bills. Because, in fact, I can't. They won't even let me get the money that I had in there for 180 days. I'll eventually get the money that I had in PayPal. But for now, I got to go in around and scramble everything, switch everything over to cards. But I got a guy there's a Mysterian who works at PayPal who's trying to help. Trying to, giving me some suggestions. He gave me a number I could call, and the number's like, oh yeah, it's clear that's a misunderstanding. But they sent you that letter, that's it. Yeah, they're owned by the same company. PayPal owns Venmo. So I got the message about Venmo early the other morning, and then it was, oh, wait a minute, that's owned by PayPal? Then I checked the email from PayPal. Yep, there's that email. Thank you, Natalie. What's everybody's favorite MST3K episode? Mine is Angel's Revenge. Oh, hey, Ellen. Well, I can see it from their side. If they think that I'm running some kind of a gambling operation, it's kind of like I can understand why they would err on the side of caution. It's like a wall around the Torah rule. But I really wish they had sent me a warning or something. Well, really my favorite MST3K is the short Why Study Industrial Arts. I can watch that one over and over again. I like the shorts better than the full movies most of the time.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular...
I accuse my parents, that's a good one too. I won an essay contest. When we first moved out of Des Moines and moved to Georgia, we didn't get Comedy Central in Des Moines, but Georgia did. So Eli and I would wait up until midnight. It was on at midnight, and we would try to stay awake for it. And then that summer, Mike and Kevin from MST3K were at Dragon Con, so we went to that. And I think if you watch the Time Travel Pub Crawls especially, you can totally see the influence of MST3K in the Time Travel Pub Crawls. Eli's my brother, Bella. You see him a lot on our... He shows up on quite a few of these. Especially the Time Travel Pub Crawls that we run occasionally. I remember right in the middle of that summer we went to see Waterworld, and we couldn't turn it off. We were talking back to that movie the whole time. I was like, dude, we should just watch the movie. And we're being impolite, but no, you couldn't turn it off. When you've been watching that show too much. No, but I'm terrible at staying up late, though. So I never made it past, like... I liked it when they were doing shorts, because I knew I could stay awake for those.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it. Trucking.
Oh, yeah, looking back, Waterworld, we gave it out as good as it deserved. It's like, this is a movie where dirt is a huge commodity and nobody can find any dirt, but everybody is filthy. Like, everybody's sitting on a fortune just rubbing behind their ears in this movie. Yes, Susan, we did some talking back to Godzilla vs. Kong, Aiden and I did. It was a fun movie once it got going. Once it got down to business and the monsters started pounding each other, then it was a pretty fun movie. But the whole subplot with the conspiracy theory guy was completely pointless. They could have lifted it right out, it would have made the movie a little bit faster. But I guess they had to have something for Millie Bobby Brown to do. All over town, you see them trucking. Eleanor, thanks. Right now, the way you can donate is on these things here. I set up an alternate PayPal account this morning, but it sounds like it's not working. Let's see what happens if I try to log in. Oh no, it's working a bit. People sent some money on it. Okay, tip at paypal.com does seem to work. Let me go unfix that.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
So this PayPal tip at MysteriaChicago.com is apparently working. A couple of people managed to hit it. Oh yeah, I don't intend to leave the money there. I don't know what I'll do with it yet. Paula, that's what I was thinking. He was like, do I really need this guy talking about fluoride in the water conspiracy theory crap? I mean, are we just like, if it's not really germane to the plot at all, why give it a voice? But then when the monsters start pounding each other, it's a lot of fun. Thanks, June. Have a good night. Yeah, Venmo and PayPal will not let me appeal it. They won't let me explain my side. There's a guy at the company who's giving me advice. Yeah, I'll eventually, like after 180 days, they'll send me information about how I can access my funds in PayPal. Thanks. Tell Keaton thanks, Kristen. Zelle seems to be working for most people. I don't know why it's not working for everybody. I mean, people have always occasionally sent me stuff on Zelle, just kind of guessed that was the email based on the PayPal. And Pamela, yeah, this new one is like a worst thing they can do is make me get rid of it, PayPal. Tip at mysteriouschicago.com. Yeah, Phoenix, that's what it was. It's like something triggered it. Or like contests and stuff. I don't know why Zelle's working for some people and not for others. That's annoying. Cash App does have this cool scanning thing, though.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo.
Now, Phoenix, thanks for asking, but no, that's kind of what they said on the phone today is like they could see, the person who I was talking to could see what the problem was and that it was a misunderstanding. But if they've sent that letter, there's nothing. Let it fly away. Yeah, I've been on PayPal for 20 years. Marty, yeah, I know where I'm going tomorrow. I have to have an easy one set up. One that I think will be pretty easy. I don't know why Zelle's not working for everybody. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, don't go deleting Venmo on my account. I mean, I love that platform. I loved it. Thanks, Phoenix. Okay, maybe if I wonder if I move that down here, I can make this a little bigger and easier to read. I think maybe I have a typo in there or something. Yeah, use this PayPal if you can, but for now it's strictly experimental. Yeah, Zelle is very much dependent on your bank. As well, I had trouble getting mine to work with it for a while. But the new PayPal address seems to be accepting funds. Just a matter of what I'll be able to do with them is the thing. Okay, it says some of it is on hold. Some of it is available and some of it is on hold. I don't know what that means. Oh yeah, Melina's Zell should be up and running. It doesn't seem to be working for everybody, but I don't have the stuff set up to pull the funds yet. I got to set it up with a different bank account and try to, you know, trick them. Cindy, I believe I did. I did get some people donating on Zelle the last couple of days as a test. I appreciate it tremendously, of course. That's probably what I'll do. Is I'll just send the new PayPal over to Ronnie. Yeah, if my bank, I'm with a really small bank, and they support Zelle. It took them a minute. No, I have no way of knowing why Zelle is working for some people but not others right now.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. This is the
That's
National
definitely
Broadcasting
annoying.
Company.
Thanks. Good night, Sandy. Rewind the Benny a bit more. I can either hang out or I can wallow, so I'm going to hang out. Lost my eBay auction, my neighbor's drain's messed up. I haven't had a dishwasher in several months. And they think I'm a gambling kingpin, but I don't have a dishwasher. And I'm using this empty glass like a prop. Now, Susie, that's possible, but I've never had... It wasn't like that before for me. Now, Debbie, if everybody sends a complaint, it's not going to do a thing. Blues or country? What's the difference?
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing.
It could be either one of those. It's just a matter of whether there's drums behind it, really. All music is the blues, all of it. With all my heart. Most reliable still seems to be if you go to the Eventbrite page. Now, if I was going to be a kingpin, I would need some tunnels around here. I would need some vaults. And they wouldn't really be for gambling, they'd just be for my servants scrubbing my obsidian bathtubs. And the 4 people to make me hot chocolate, one to get the packet out, one to add the hot water, one to stir it, one to bring it to me. Lisa, yes, Aiden does dishes if I ask him to. Aiden is very good with household chores. Usually I don't even have to ask him to, he just does. But when he's at his dad's, I'm stuck with it. Something about this week, man. We've been talking about this on the effing group chat. It's like shitty days after shitty days. It happens. With all my heart. But on the plus side, I'm writing a great hair metal song that I'm really excited about. It's this song I thought I heard on a music video at my friend's house when I was 8. All these years later, I'm pretty sure the song wasn't real, so which means I get to write it. I don't need a special Coke to bring me a special butler to bring me a Diet Coke. Come on, Diet Coke. They can bring me a Dr. Brown's Celery, unlike the place that I ordered $4 worth of it from tonight.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny Walk. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
We could put some hidden rooms behind these bookshelves. They would just lead out to outdoors, but you know. My dad could fix that. I really wanted this cell, too. It's the perfect Muppet Babies cell, but I didn't get it. The thing about animation cells is when they come up, you gotta get them because you're never gonna see another one like it. Yeah, 3 tours today. The other one, that one in the middle, I wasn't sure if I couldn't, based on that app, I couldn't tell if anybody was watching me. I was kind of surprised to see how when I logged onto Facebook, is oh, there's a bunch of comments. People did see this thing. Kristen, I'm sorry to hear that. Muppet Babies Nightmares. I've had Muppet Babies Nightmares, but it's like, they were weird. They weren't like they were out to get me or anything. It was just something bad happened to the Muppet Babies. And not like really bad either.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passions when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Noran, I haven't done too much on YouTube. Just now and then, they want you to leave the comments up. You get the worst damn comments on YouTube. It's annoying as hell. So I put stuff on them much. I put stuff now and then I do. This one, I don't know if I guess they'll save it afterwards. Let me get my Zelle app up here, see if there's something where I have to accept or something. It's very slowly signing me in. My banking app works on it. It's taken forever to sign me in here. I got like the spinning wheel of death. I'll restart the damn app. This shouldn't be.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in...
Catherine, yeah, the tree was on 18th, not quite to Calumet. Okay, Zell just moves me over to my banking app. I see a handful of Zells on here, but not as many people are saying they sent them. Everybody's Zell's getting returned. Well, that's just super. I'll have to talk to my bank tomorrow, I guess. If anybody sees, like, a reason why it's getting returned, please let me know. Oh, okay, taxpayer. PayPal says, confirm your taxpayer status. Oh, okay. It didn't actually ask me for anything. The note just says pending. Okay. Patty, yeah, I'll get pretty much everything on Eventbrite. They might take like 1% or 0.5% or something. Becky, the tree was said to still have bullet holes in it from the Battle of Fort Dearborn in 1812, but other contemporary accounts say that in the 1830s it was just a sapling, so it probably wasn't old enough. Okay, if there's too many deposits come to Zell at once, it blocks it. Well, that's just perfect, isn't it?
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now,
I'll have to talk to my bank or something. Some of them are going through, but then you get an email later saying, no, it didn't really. Maybe if I start a corporate account on Venmo. Kathy, it's one of those things. I'll figure it out. I'll go blast some 9 Inch Nails later. And pretty soon we'll be starting to transition, so it won't be virtual tours. It won't be my whole source of income anymore. Ronnie's been pitching Ko-Fi to me. I'll probably have that one set up for Sunday morning. So, still experimenting, but it looks as though broadcasting to different platforms, at least, did work pretty well tonight. So that's pretty good.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's
Thanks, Wendy. But alright everybody, I think it's time I be logging off, so let me go ahead and quickly plug the upcoming things that are coming around anyway. Thanks for sticking through all of these difficulties. Sunday morning will be a virtual architectural boat tour. I just got a call from an architecture boat tour company wanting me to pick up some dates for this summer. I told them we'll see. And Thursday, a week from today, back to my old classic Grave Robbing 101. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. Also, of course, tomorrow morning will be Find a Grave Friday. And tomorrow evening, I will probably rant much more about this kind of stuff on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page, Whiskey and a Cookie at 6:30. So everybody, thanks a lot tonight for joining me tonight. Do I remember guiding war in high school in D.C. in 2016? Yes, Noah, yes I do. I do remember that group. Your teacher kept on smoking. Which is weird, I never see teachers smoke in front of the kids. Yeah, I remember Warren High in Washington, D.C. That would be 2017, I remember that. I'll stick around and say hi to that. Hey, Noah, how you doing? Always good to see people from my old school tours. Noah, thanks for saying that. I got the impression the adults in that group didn't like me one little bit. Partly because they caught me flicking off the statue of Jefferson Davis. I got in so much trouble for that. Everybody, Noah on the YouTube comments right now was on one of my student groups about 4 years ago. We went to D.C. And this was in 2017, the teacher was smoking in front of the kids. She was about to retire, and I guess she just figured, to hell with it all. But many of the adults on that tour, as soon as they found I was from Chicago, they were like, oh, Chicago. Which happens a lot with parents. The kids were, like with a lot of groups, the kids were great. The parents are always the bigger problem. Debbie, I've verified my status. I'm afraid that means they're going to end up connecting me to the other account. So we shall see.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
I verified it on PayPal. I haven't done much. I don't know what I can do on Zelle. Yeah, I remember the Warren High School group. We went on that cruise where the DJ had the all of the adults come up and dance, and then he broke out Ice Ice Baby, which I can sing. It's I memorized that song in 4th grade when it came out. It's amazing how much use I get out of knowing the first verse of Ice Ice Baby. Polly, I get that a lot. I take school groups to Chicago. It's like, how many of your dads said you were going to get shot? It's like half the hands go up. It's like, but now how many of you are here to buy or sell drugs? If you're not here to buy or sell drugs, you're probably okay. Yeah, I specifically remember that was the tour where it got back to the group leader that I had flicked off the statue of Jefferson Davis in the Capitol Rotunda. General Grafrian! And the Lee statue, they didn't catch me with Robert E. Lee or Alex Stevens, but I got them too. And the Lee statue is gone now. But alright, I said I was going to wrap up, so I better wrap up. So, Sunday morning architectural boat tour, Thursday night. But, alright, great that we got some new people. That's really cool. I know there were a lot of new people coming on this one even before I moved it along. It was just a high-interest tour. People seem to really be excited about this one. I was excited about this one, too. I feel like it went pretty well. I'm sure we'll be bringing this one out again before too long. So, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. So, until tomorrow morning, in probably a shorter edition of Find a Grave Friday, stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, stay happy, stay hungry. Keep writing hairband songs. Stay spooky. And if you can, of course, stay home. Have a great night, everybody.